This is my field experience analysis. In my field placement, I observed three classrooms. The first was Peckway Preschool, in which I observed children ages 4 and 5 years old. In this classroom, there were not students who were identified as having a disability. The second was a Head Start preschool in Lancaster City called Carol B. Winters Center, where I observed, again, preschool, and children ages 3 through 5. This classroom had many bilingual children and was taught by one teacher who spoke only English and an assistant who was fluent in Spanish. There were also two students who are identified as having behavioral disabilities in this classroom. The last classroom I observed was Brecknock Elementary in a first grade classroom. In this classroom, there were no children who were identified as having any form of disability. I may not have been able to observe many children who were labeled as having a disability because, for the most part, I was in classrooms with preschool children. As we discussed in class, many diagnoses of children at this age are held back because the children could just be developing at a slower rate than their peers. This booklet was found in a classroom in which almost every child was bilingual. Many of the children in this classroom spoke primarily Spanish in their homes and learned English as a second language. This booklet had many of the classroom rules written in both Spanish and English with pictures of what each rule would look like. This helps children practice their English while also reminding them of the important rules for the classroom. In this classroom, the teacher also read the children books in both Spanish and English. Although these children were not in any sort of program that the book talks about, the type of education that they were receiving most closely resembles a maintenance or developmental program. They received the majority of their instruction in English, but were also addressed by teachers in Spanish at times. This behavioral chart was found in a classroom where there were not any children with disabilities. However, this is a practice that this teacher uses every year and one that would be very effective in monitoring the behavior of children with a disability. With this chart, children start with 4 stars and are given the opportunity to lose their stars or gain stars depending on their compliance with classroom rules. At the end of the week, if the students have consistently earned an extra star, they're rewarded with fun games and activities. This star chart would be a great example of a positive behavioral support. This chart promotes healthy behavior and rewards children who behave appropriately. What makes this positive behavioral support, though, is what happens when the children don't behave appropriately and get stars taken away. When this happens consistently, children are not punished, but instead have to reflect and talk to a teacher about why they are struggling and make plans of how to improve. This is a picture of a large poster that was hanging on the wall in one of the classrooms I observed. It was hanging above an area where children were allowed to sit and read and have free time. On the smaller pictures on the poster are options of things that are appropriate for the children to do during their time. This provides children with a reminder of appropriate behavior and keeps them on task. It also gives them many options of things they can do and have a choice. According to our book, one effective way of helping children with ADHD is providing them with instructional choice. This is a perfect example of that. This wall provides a set of teacher-developed tasks that the child can perform. Because the child is able to choose from many different things he or she wants to do, and all of these options are laid out right in front of them, it's more likely that they will choose the right behavior. In the classroom I observed, this was definitely the case. This picture is another great example of a device that could help children with a behavioral problem. This was displayed on a bulletin board in one of the classrooms I was in. This teacher used the fairly common practice of asking her students to give her 5. At this point in the year, all of her students knew what this meant. When she said it, they would automatically assume the legs crossed, hands still, eyes on the teacher, mouths closed, ears listening position. Although there weren't any students that struggled with the following model very much, a child with a behavioral disorder may not catch on quite as easily. For this reason, it would be an effective tool to have something like this hanging on the wall as a reminder. This is an effective instructional practice that our book calls contingency management. This bulletin board positively states rules with clear expectations and guidelines of what is expected of the children when the teacher wants their attention. This is another tool that benefits children with any form of disability that would cause them to act out in the classroom. In this device, children are able to move up the traffic light for good behavior and down for not as good. This is one of the more common devices in the classroom to monitor behavior. It's a good way for students to monitor themselves and see how they are visually behaving, since it may be hard for them to tell if they're acting appropriately. Also, there were rewards for if every child in the classroom stayed on green the entire day. By rewarding positive behavior, the students see the benefits of their good behavior. There are a few negatives to behavior charts, though. They can be embarrassing for children since they're always on display for the whole class to see. Perhaps a better tool would be one in which the teacher and the child are the only one who can see the chart. I learned that many of the devices that teachers use to benefit children with disabilities can also be very beneficial to children without disabilities. I also learned that the devices that the teachers use, at least in the classrooms I observed, were no tech. Before having seen this, I would not have been able to understand exactly why the things I observed were beneficial, or maybe not so beneficial, to children with disabilities.